very good. Yeah.
Very interesting session entitled the European Security Architecture and the day after. I can do better without the microphone. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we go again. We are ready to have this very interesting session, the European security architecture after the war in Ukraine. We were supposed to have 5 speakers. Nadia couldn't come, so we are 4. There are a lot of issues to address here. The process is that I will be giving each speaker about 10 to 12 minutes.
How much?
10 to 12 minutes.
10 to 12 minutes? Okay. Here, because I was oriented to 2 questions, so I
10 to, you can speak less but no more, okay? And then I will be asking the speakers specific questions. Some are the same, some are not. Yesterday I was on a panel on non-violence, and today I'm chairing this session, and we look forward to a very interesting discussion. We will start Tina, who will address the issue of the European enlargement within the framework of this discussion. Tina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. A bit too much voice, but we need the mics for the live streaming. I would appreciate if you could actually lower the volume of my mic, if that's possible, a little bit. So we just had a session here actually in the same room about enlargement, but I still take this opportunity to, coming from Brussels as well, to make a few points. Now, starting point for the coming wave of the enlargement is that this enlargement is very much motivated by the security concerns. On the previous panel, I think we heard some speakers referring to defining strategies with different candidate countries vis-à-vis Western Balkans, with the Eastern Partnership Trio. And the key points of the previous session, the way I got it, was that it should start with, of course, economic integration. And I very much agree with it. Economic integration has always been at the very core of how candidate countries would ease their access to the European Union single market and European integration. However, right now, the EU's enlargement is very much stimulated, incentivized with the change geopolitical circumstances and with security concerns. So the EU enlargement will not simply happen if these security concerns are not addressed first. And what I have in mind is whether the European Union can actually provide security to its member states and to the candidate countries standing in the line. European Union, as we all know it, it's a very much the treaty-based institution, and we have Article 42, paragraph 7 about solidarity on the security. However, it has never really been triggered, right? So we still have to test and try to interpret what does the EU mean actually with this treaty provisions. However, we know, and what we know is that previous enlargement, Big Bang enlargement as we call it, 2004, came along with these back then new member states becoming also the NATO members, right? So the NATO is the security union, and we know the European Union is really not the security union. So I do not see, especially, enlargement coming ahead with the Eastern Partnership Trio, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, if there are no security guarantees and if there are no their NATO membership basically on the table. Now, a few points how we got until here, and how EU has been engaged with those countries in the past, and what are the lessons learned. Now, EU has had Eastern Partnership policy with those countries, right? Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, which simply just didn't work. The whole point was the strategic engagement of the European Union with this trio without proposing their membership perspectives, without putting it on the table. These countries have signed association agreements, they have signed deep and comprehensive free trade areas, which indeed brought those countries closer to the EU single market, but because there was never promised the membership, again, draw the comparison with the Western Balkan countries, which have been promised the European perspective back in Thessaloniki Summit 2003, right? Those trio are very, very vulnerable, and their EU membership was never really on the table. And it had to be, again, Russia to come in and be really active, and EU, again, being, reactive rather than proactive, that, Russia brings a war at the border. So EU finally wakes up and puts there the membership perspective. Again, this ambiguity that was applied from the European Union vis-à-vis its neighbors simply just didn't work. And it did not deter Russia to just, bring another war in the region with its neighbors. So this was the lesson learned, that EU has to be proactive, not really reactive, and security concerns have been at the core, are at the core, and will remain on the core. And EU has to have the strategy, how it will play with it. So far, what we see with also enlargement policy, it was, developed and acted on an emergency cases, right? There is urgency and the EU acts, but there is still not a strategy, when this will happen, what to do with the country. Ukraine, I have in mind, that is at war. Of course, Ukraine has been very ambitious implementing reforms, which is really, really, impressive. The country is at war. And EU has put forward all the facilities and instruments to help the country at war to survive. But still, we don't have a clear horizon how enlargement will go ahead, which of course puts a lot of question marks on the EU's enlargement policy, whether it works, whether it doesn't work. But again, one thing, if anything is clear, is that this process will not go forward if there are no security guarantees in place. So I will stop here, not to take more time.
I will get back to you with questions after everybody's finished.
After your two questions you mentioned in the letter, right, to everybody, about could the war be prevented and second
Yes, you can.
Okay.
What I send you is I send everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, but I will get back after
Okay.
with
Okay.
specific question for each one of them. Some will be the same. So the floor is yours.
Kalispera. And thank you very much for inviting. And I would like also to thank the people and the government of Cyprus, because Cyprus supported territorial integrity of Ukraine during the resolutions in the United Nations. Cyprus supported territorial integrity of Ukraine in the United Nations, so we are thankful to people and the government of Cyprus. Cyprus also participated in the so-called Global Summit of Peace, and Cyprus joined the communique of this summit, and Cyprus continued to work in, I believe, 3 working groups on that. So you understand what we have. You have your own tragedy, and you understand what is divided country, what is deportations, what is the changing of demographic situation on the territory which are under occupation, and so on and so forth. So every tragedy is about human beings, is tragedy. Okay, in different parts of the world, for Cyprus, Ukraine, Middle East. What made Ukrainian case very, very specific? Because Ukraine was the 3rd largest nuclear nation in the world after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. We gave up our nuclear arsenal, which was larger than British, French, and Chinese combined together. And we received the territorial guarantees of our territorial integrity from the US, the UK, and Russia. So Russia guaranteed. Oh, you are showing my slides. Okay, wonderful. Ah, wow. Okay, I didn't expect that. I didn't have hope for that. Miracle, yeah. So, and officially, Ukraine had non-bloc status. So we were a neutral country before 2014. So Russia violated everything, its own obligations. They used the bluff about NATO expansion, but we were neutral. We were officially declared at the governmental level. And please show the next slide. Yeah, and here you... Okay. And here you see Ukrainians were asked, Ukrainians were asked what is the best way to guarantee security of Ukraine. Okay, so in 2020, that is before Russian aggression, Russian occupation of Crimea, only about 20% of Ukrainians, hope to join NATO. Only 12%. Most non-aligned status. So basically what Putin's saying, is a threat from the territory of Ukraine because of NATO is a lie. Again, look. And then Russia attacked in 2014. And you see how support for NATO increased. I believe this is normal reaction of normal people. The treaty was violated. Russia was an aggressor, and Russia started this aggression since 2014. So, but one more specific issue is that the war in Ukraine basically is not about territory. Putin doesn't want to keep only Crimea or Donbass. Putin would like to seize the whole Ukraine and to destroy the Ukrainian nation. And he openly is saying about it. So he is saying that Ukrainians do not exist unless they recognize themselves as part of great Russian people. So basically, I do not exist. You see? Right, and so we would like to be sovereign, independent, and decide by ourselves, not by Putin. So again, what's happening in Ukraine is the idea of the aggressor to destroy the whole nation, to destroy the whole country. In this situation, but basically your question was it possible to prevent the war? And I think this is really, really important. So I will start to answer it. With dictators and aggressors, appeasement doesn't work. It didn't work before World War II with Hitler. It didn't work with Putin. After invasion to Georgia, after war in Syria, with all the crimes conducted by Russian forces, after annexation of Crimea, after the war in Donbass, and at all these points, the Western reaction was weak. There were continuous and very, very, I would say, naive thinking about, okay, let's have negotiations. Let's sit and talk and have a middle line. And we tried to explain to our Western partners, no, to the whole community, basically, international community, because the annexation of Crimea was denounced by 100 countries. The present war was denounced by 140 plus countries, including Cyprus. So, this appeasement, actually only stimulated Putin, to more and more aggressive acts, and finally to the full-scale war never seen in Europe since World War II. So unfortunately, these people like Putin and other dictators who would like to have wars, they have only one incentive, to stop the war or not to start it, the language of force. So you need to show real red lines for such a behavior. Now, if we see that international law doesn't work, that all the treaties are violated, that now Russia is declaring its desire to destroy the whole nation, and Russia doesn't want negotiations, so what should we do? If you are attacked, your territory is occupied, and the aggressor is saying that you do not exist, what would you do? Today, actually, I've been to National Struggle Museum here in Cyprus. This is a different situation, definitely in different contexts, but we do not agree to that. We continue to fight. But, you know, to fight the aggressor, we need the weapons. And at this point, what Russians are doing, actually, Russians are bombarding the whole Ukraine. Today there were 2 air alarms. I know about it because we have it in our phones. So I know about it. 2 times there was air alarm in Kyiv, so Kyivites had to go to shelter. And what we are asking right now, we ask for more weapons to close the skies. We ask, Russians are bombarding us from their strategic bases deep inside Russia, and we cannot respond. You know, so we have Western weapons to respond, but we are not allowed to do that. And that's why we are asking for understanding of the West, that you cannot stop aggressor only by, you know, praying or only by asking him to stop. We need not only military weapons, we need economic sanctions. Very important to stop Russian aggression. We need Russian isolation. In the same way, for example, in culture, sport, other issues, Olympic Games, in the same way as South African apartheid regime, you know, was isolated by international community. So we need your support of the whole international community. Again, we are thankful to Cyprus, Republic of Cyprus, for this support. We will continue to fight in any case, and by continuing fighting, we are defending the whole Europe, and we are defending your values. Thanks a lot. Evcharisto.
I will follow up with questions after.
Sure.
Mirko,
Thank you, Andreas. I want to go back to the theme of the conference, but I want to depart from the concept of red lines, because if we discuss about geopolitics and security and wars, the concept of red line is very important, and I believe that Americans, for example, in Syria know it very well. Red line in Ukraine. Obviously, Mr. Haran, you are right.
Professor Haran.
Professor Haran, sorry. When Russia invaded Ukraine, obviously it crossed the red line. But red line, if they are credible, they need to be enforced. But there needs to be the political willingness to enforce them. So, you know, I believe in the Latin word, tertium non datur, so there is no third way. And so, like, in the end, in the war between Russia and Ukraine, there are only, and sadly, 2 ways. One way is to fight until someone loses, because we know that in order to make peace after a war, there needs to be someone that loses and someone that wins. Take, for example, the Second World War, or any other war in which there has been a clear loser and a clear winner. I come from a country, Italy, that was a clear loser of the Second World War. And after that, we acknowledged it, and we live peacefully with the Western community. So when a war ends, there needs to be a precise winner and precise loser. And what does it mean? It means that if Ukraine wants to win, more weapons, and I say, obviously I am exaggerating, it's paradoxic, but just to understand the point, if the West, if America, if the European Union, if every single state of the European Union, because I tend to think more about single nation state. I believe that nation states are more important than the European Union. It's the nation states that decide the foreign policy, not the European Union, and the security, because I believe that security, defense are the core of nation states. It's not the core of the European Union. It's the core of every nation states, because a nation states, it's about its culture, it's about its language, it's about common roots. So defense and security is at the heart of every single nation state. So if every single nation state of Europe plus America wants to defend Ukraine, they need to send their soldiers to defend Ukraine and need to fight. It's paradoxic. It's a paradox. I am exaggerating. So, but obviously, in reality, it's more weapon. In a paradox, send people to fight. The other side of the equation, in which tertium non datur, is a compromise, in which there is top-level diplomacy, in which the two presidents speak and they come to a compromise. That's it. This is the two sides of the possible resolution of the war in Ukraine. Getting back to the architecture, the European security architecture after the war in Ukraine, obviously the first answer that you have in mind, it's about common defense. But as I have told you before, this is very difficult. Obviously, I'm not going into the technicalities. I have done politics in the past, so I'm trying to think about in a political way and think about how political ruling classes and how political leaders think, not at the technical way on the I want to do it, we will do it. The strategy is I'm trying to think about what is possible. I'm trying to think about what is possible given the current and given also the future leadership in the European nation states. Common defense policy, it means that you need to have a common army, common defense, but defense, it's about the politics of a nation state, and as we have noticed, single nation states in Europe have different approach towards war in Ukraine. They have even different approach towards the war between Israel and Hamas. So it's very difficult to put in the same table a common security architecture vis-à-vis the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Because every single country in Europe, given its geography, its story, rooted in not centuries but millenniums of stories rooted in Europe, they have different perspective and different approaches towards Russia and towards Ukraine. Some countries might be more harsh on the issues. Some countries, given their relationship, given their culture, given their language, given their history, they might have different opinions on the war. Take, for example, Hungary. Hungary is the one that is voting every time against every sanctions on Russia. Why? Because they have history, because they have a culture, they have a different approach towards the war. Like it's really, really difficult to harmonize. It's easy to harmonize the political views on easy tasks. It's very difficult to harmonize political views with something called defense and security, which are the art of the nation state, and it's the things that let you win or lose elections. Because remember that the business of a politician, and I'm speaking about someone that has done politics, it's about winning or losing elections. Obviously, it's about the well-being of population, it's about, obviously, but the business of a politician is to arrive at the electoral meeting and win. And when we speak about defense and security, these are something that politicians and political rulers want to take for themselves, and rightly so, because it's the heart of what a nation state is. So, common security architecture in Europe, it's very difficult, but we have to understand, I'm trying to change the title of the panel, the security architecture after the possible end of the war in Ukraine. So we can have different security architecture, if we want to call it like this, given on how the conflict ends.
The title doesn't say common. It's a different
European
theme.
security.
It's a different theme, and we come back to that.
A different European security architecture after the possible end of the war in Ukraine. I will take it like this. Putative end. If it stops with a compromise, does it stop with after 10 years of conflict? I believe that we can discuss about it after.
Thank you. And now, Professor Mallinson,
What would you like me to talk about?
whatever you want.
Well, we shall see. Oh, thank you. Shall I take that? All right. Well, before I shock you a bit, I'd better tell you that as a historian, a pedantic historian, and an ex-British diplomat who researches archives crazily, who's done that for many years, I can simply quote one of my late medieval heroes, Giordani, that things have always been the same, that the past sheds light on the future, but the same things return only with different names and colors, which is what I see. We use this word innovation and change in such a big way, but believe me, at the basis of everything is the human individual, which becomes the group, the family, the group, and then becomes the, bigger group, the corporation, and finally a state. In that connection, I get very worried about the way people use the word nation state. It's too fuzzy. It all goes back to 1648 when they had a few things in Germany and they allowed Protestants and Roman Catholics to do blah, blah, blah. No, a nation is a nation and a state is a state. And I prefer to use the word state, interstate relations, rather than international relations, which is emotional and fuzzy and ideological and political. Interstate relations, you can be much clearer in your analysis. I quote, before I begin to shock you, I now quote one of my favorite historians, A.J.P. Taylor. A historian must not hesitate, even if his books help and comfort the Queen's enemies, or even the common enemies of mankind. In other words, I'm not a party political designer academic, I'm not a nasty, difficult, non-ideological historian. Now, the title of my very brief expose was Cyprus as a Geopolitical Tool, Myth, Reality, and Academic Propaganda. I think that says enough. We all know that there are many academics who are paid in one way or another, who get promoted for saying the right thing. I know of some myself, none in this room luckily, who get money from the British Foreign Office to downplay Britain's terrible naughtiness over Cyprus. The current trend is to downplay the bad and the ugly and emphasize the few good things. That's wrong, because history comes back and bites you. Because everything for me is down to the individual, and you must look at atavism, emotional, nostalgia, individual hatred, fear. Take a look at some of the people who determine what goes on in the world. How about Heinz Kissinger, otherwise known as Henry Kissinger? I have a list of quotes here about him, which will shock you. Very nasty criticisms from other diplomats. But people like that, when they get into the public eye and when they gain power, can be extremely dangerous. Boris Johnson's another one. He's not even that English, you know, if you look at his ethnic background, but like many, he becomes more English than the English. As we know that about many immigrants, and I'm not criticizing them, or semi-immigrants, they love the country they go to, and I understand that. But they become almost more English and more American, take a look at the Cubans, than the actual Americans and the English. And they can be dangerous. They can be nationalistic. Now, as a historian, I'm very skeptical about any form of nationalism, whether it's Russian or Ukrainian. I'm skeptical, and it leads to war.
Can you explain what is Ukrainian nationalism?
Well, people who stand up and shout anti-Russian slogans because they hate the Russians. They used to love the Russians once, but
have you ever seen them?
So have I what?
Have you seen them?
Seen whom?
Ukrainians who are saying anti-Russian slogans. Never ever.
I'm afraid
Never,
there's a lot of hatred which is developed from we all know that. From reading everything, yes.
We have a lot. Let me just.
Look, can I carry on? You interrupted.
It's
At the end,
okay.
please.
Okay, I will.
I'm just saying, I find nationalism leads to extremism, which is very dangerous. I respect you for loving your country. Is that enough? I hope so.
No.
Now then, good. Hard cheese, old boy. Now then, there we go. The question of European defense. We all know that the European army failed in 1954. The US was desperate to have one because it would have been under US control. But of course, it failed by one vote in the French Parliament. This is what led to the Brussels Treaty Organization, which led to NATO, and therefore the Cold War, of course. Russia was also, you know, being a bit difficult at the time. We know that after the war, the Berlin airlift, but Russia did not start NATO. NATO began, and the Warsaw Pact didn't come until a few years later, worth remembering. Also worth remembering, and this is the Cyprus context, that the as regards the Cold War in the Balkans, that happened because Britain brought America into the Balkans with the Truman Doctrine. Aided and abetted by a so-called Labour government that had a very Churchillian anti-Russian policy. Because Britain has always feared and hated Russia since at least 1791, when William Pitt, William Pitt criticized them very badly. That's when the Cold War began, actually. It's all about the great game and fear and anger and fury and who controls the Dardanelles. And that's one of the reasons why Britain got Cyprus, to watch over a dying Ottoman Empire, Russia. We must look at everything, not just the propaganda, everybody. Anyway, so if you look at European security, NATO was formed. Ever after, there were still movements to have a European army. Now, the Soviet Union, I don't think, would have minded a European army, provided it was independent of NATO. That was the big question. Ever since then, Britain and America have fought tooth and nail against any effort to have a proper European army. This is very well known. Totally against it. And that's one of the reasons why Britain, on the US's behalf, supported the enlargement, the huge enlargement of the European Union, 10 countries, which half destroyed efficient administration. Because human beings can only do so much. You had so many countries trying to have a coherent policy, extremely difficult, institutionally, administratively, and even psychologically. And so the situation now is that Britain and America will never want a European army because that's a competitor for NATO. Full stop. So we talk about European architecture. The word architecture worries me. I would say that things are becoming currently more chaotic, especially with this Ukraine business, which is a proxy war. Make no mistake what happened. I do not believe that Moscow, during the Soviet Union, ever considered the Ukraine to be part of Russia, by the way, during the Soviet Union. Now, after that, obviously, we know about the historical, the Kievan Rus and all that. We know... Hi. We know about the Kievan Rus and all that. We know the history. We know there are two sides to the story, even 5 sides. We know that there are many people in Ukraine, the more Polish, Lithuanian types who helped the Germans in the war. Okay, and we know that the East is mainly Russian-oriented psychologically. We know these facts. We can't deny them. Russia broke the international law, of course, in invading. Sadly, it had its reasons. What had Russia seen? It had seen, it had seen NATO expanding in 1999 and bombing Belgrade illegally in a big PR operation to bring in Poland, etc. Did nothing. We then saw them destroying Libya. Nothing. We then saw them going into Iraq on a lie. Oh, don't mention that, please. Oh, no. We then saw that, and then we saw the Americans trying to destabilize Syria, and the Russians said, "Niet, enough is enough." And then we saw the Russian NATO, this manic machine with no reverse gear, trying to expand and expand, not only for geopolitical reasons, because geopolitics is a very crude pseudoscience. I hope you all know that. And Russia just said, no, let's try, let's say we want a neutral Ukraine, we love you. And no, they couldn't. And then you had this funny woman, Victoria Nuland, coming over and saying, F the EU, and the legitimate leader of Ukraine had to get out. And then the killing started against the Russian-speaking population because they wanted to be a little more independent. Okay, it happens in countries. Ask the Americans. And so we are where we are. Then we have the Minsk agreements, which it was later admitted by Angela Merkel was simply a way to keep on the war, not to have peace. And so obviously, you know, clearly we're in a mess now. With a mess, there are not a very good Ukrainians, I suspect, who also understand the Russian position, but they have to be very careful. There are a lot of people who love Russia, and a lot of Russians who love Ukraine. Now, my contacts in Moscow, I won't say who, 1 or 2 of them, the academics, are critical of what Russia has done. Of course they are. Of course they are. But by and large, most of them think that the West, it's against the West. Ukraine is a victim of NATO's desires. I'm sorry to put it so crudely. And there's a connection with Cyprus. Because Ukraine, like Cyprus, I think is also a victim of the greed of international armchair power politics. I'm sorry, but that's the end. You can ask me any specific questions you want. I've got quotes here to shock you about the 1944, 1947, which is when the Cyprus Forum really began, the writing on the wall. I've got so many quotes, it's embarrassing, but I'm boring you now and boring myself, so I'll stop for now.
Okay, thank you. We have four different perspectives. I will not try to synthesize, but just share a few points and also raise some questions to our speakers here. Now, when we talk about the European security architecture, in literature, there may be two perspectives. One, can Europe build a common security architecture? And if yes, who will participate in that? Okay. The members of the Union or who else? And then the second perspective, can we have a security architecture like the times of the Cold War, when Washington and Moscow would sit down and sign a treaty, 1, 2, 3. And that is the issues in the literature. Okay. So this is in relation to that. Now, coming to the three questions. The questions is that the two common questions for everybody is that could the war have been avoided? Okay. Could the invasion have been prevented? One question is that. The second one is position yourself in relation to the security architecture. I'm talking about either way. And then the third, which is specific to you, I understand that you raised the question that the issue of accession of Ukraine to the Union has been security driven. In the case of Cyprus too, when we wanted to become members of the Union, that was one of our motives. We understand that we feel better to be in the Union, but we don't feel we do not feel absolute security. And if God forbid we have a new attack by Turkey, I don't have any illusions. Okay. And the other element is the economic side. Have there been any studies about the time it would take for accession and the economics behind it?
Sure. Thank you for these big questions. And I also want to react to the comments made by other speakers, as we may not agree on a number of things. Now, just to come back to my points I raised when I had my first intervention, this war, definitely, the strategy that EU has followed with strategic ambiguity, not offering Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova clearly membership perspective, did not deter Russia from invading them, right? So this we know didn't work. Has this been on the table? Has these countries were promised the membership to the NATO at the Bucharest summit? Perhaps the war would have been avoided, but it just didn't happen, right? We have clear counterfactuals. Coming back to the comments I've heard about that this is a proxy war dictated by the NATO desires. I just want to go back to the history and see how those countries, I have just before Russia invaded Georgia, right, asked for the NATO membership, and whether what was NATO's response? They were not politically ready. They were militarily ready. They were not politically ready to offer those countries the membership, right? So whose desire was there? The desire was coming from the sovereign states that fairly should have their own free choices to make which alliance to join, right? This is the sovereign state. This is the international law we're talking about. And this desire certainly did not come from the NATO, and history has it, right? Now, coming to another point about security architecture, European security architecture. Now, what we are seeing here, the way geopolitics has emerged is that because the European Union has not expanded its borders, this is why Russia brought the borders closer to the European Union. Again, coming from Georgia, where we have hundreds of years of history, Russia invading its neighbors, we know that history has it that Russia has been aggressor, right? This is simply a lot of wars we have in the region. And EU had to be smarter and see if I do not expand and if I do not foresee building my security in order to be ready to expand, then there is another player in the region who will move borders closer to me. And that's what exactly happened. As I said, EU has not been proactive, it has been reactive, and we've seen the war. Now, coming to the other points raised by Mirko, I think, about the security and defense, which of course is very, very sensitive topic in the European Union, and the reason why European Union doesn't have a common, I mean, okay, we have common foreign security, CFSP, but okay, how strong that is, that's a question, right? Why we don't have the common defense union? Why EU doesn't have a clear common security policy and foreign policy? Why the member states are divided? Precisely as the points you made, right? That member states are divided. The question, and we know that they are divided. The question is whether this model is working. And my comment, as coming from Brussels and the expert working on those, is just simply not working, because the European Union. This makes European Union a very, very weak player. When the member states cannot have one position on the Middle East, it just makes the EU, at a hilarious role at the global stage, and it doesn't really serve the EU security interest as the Union. Of course, there are divisions, but the question is, which European Union we want to have. And again, here, we go back to the treaty. Treaty defines what does the Union stand on, right? European Union is founded on the European values and democratic values. When we talk about Hungary and Hungary's disagreement, of course, they have different standpoint, but also look at what's happening to Hungary. This is a country where there is a democratic backsliding, right? So the question we should be asking when the member states of the European Union go against the treaty and they no longer fit, or they go against the European values, should they be in the Union? Because if the Union goes apart, or the member states go out of these European values and the democratic values, then of course they make the Union as a weaker point, and it does not serve anybody's interest. Is it in Italy's interest, or is it in Hungary's interest to have wars in the region? I don't think so. And how do we solve the wars in the region? We have the common voice, otherwise it doesn't work. I will come to the other point you raised indeed. And another thing, of course, economic side of it, as you rightly asked, because you cannot build the common security union, you cannot have the army if you don't put the money in it, and the EU's budget is tiny, by the way, and the spending on defense in general is not to the standards. We're learning it now. Whether, and the question the way you phrased it, whether we can have it. We can have it.
No, I didn't ask. Don't put words into my mouth.
Sure.
I asked you, did you study economics?
Sure. But the question, no. The question was, can we have it? Like, we can have the European security architecture that works for the Union. The question is whether should.
Before we talking about the economics, the first question was the economics. Are there any economic studies about the timing of accession and the,
sure.
and the timing of that is this, and then we can talk about the European security.
Sure. Okay, coming back to the economic side of the enlargement, the timing, we go back to the statements of the European Commission officials where we see that the horizon to reach the horizon is 2030, that, EU may expect to have the new member states, but whether they will all exceed the European Union, whether it's going to be just tiny Montenegro, economically small, tiny Montenegro, that's a big question mark. And I would say that very much depends how the war ends and when the war ends, right? Has been the EU getting ready for the next enlargement wave? Definitely. It's the first steps, but it's definitely getting there and starting working on it. And you see that economically by putting forward Ukraine facility, which is 50 billion, and you see that creating more money, fresh money, 6 billion for the Western Balkan countries through another facility for Western Balkans. And of course, there has to be more money put in there, but you already see the revisions of the multi-annual financial framework, MFF, which is the EU budget, and there will be more to follow, given the needs of these countries. And we don't have clear horizons, and I don't think we will have the clear horizons before, these were basically ends. And coming back to another point that comes back to the enlargement. I'm sorry?
You're answering more Mirko.
No, I think I've tried to incorporating because they are very much overlapping.
I will insist to get an answer.
On
what I asked, and I will ask you one more question.
Sure. No, you ask me the question. Because I believe I answered to the questions.
I didn't get it. Okay.
Could you repeat the question which I didn't answer? No, I want to answer the question.
Forget the economics, we have done it. With the European security architecture, how do you see it? A common security by members of the European Union plus others to be enlarged or whatever, or an architecture based on an agreement within the framework of Washington and Moscow signing something?
Well, Russia unfortunately doesn't have a good reputation of sticking to the treaties or signed agreements. That doesn't give me enough, enough evidence to support that idea.
It's fine, I respect it, okay. And another question, would you support the same kind of sanctions against Russia for Turkey?
Which sanctions do you have? The 14 packages of sanctions that
all
EU...
All sanctions that have been imposed against Russia and have been pursued 100% by the Republic of Cyprus, would you do the same for Cyprus, for Turkey?
Yeah, indeed, there is no same situation, but...
Oh, it's worse. It's occupation of 40%. It's occupation of 40%.
For 50 years.
For 50 years.
To a member state.
Yes, we're a member state. And many times when we go to European fora, they tell us to show understanding to the pride of the Turks. That's what I hear when I go to European think tanks. If I dare say the word, reprimand, I'm asked to keep my mouth shut. And I hope this does not happen in Nicosia. When I'm saying sanctions to Turkey, I have not, by the way, argued for that. But I'm saying, if I were to argue, would you support it?
I don't have a clear answer to that because
I did not expect that you have.
No. Because I do not. Because I do not specialize on this particular conflict. However,
Get me a specialist.
However, I mean, Turkey, in my view, deserves a lot of sanctions in general because it has been the spoiler, simply the spoiler in the region. Although the country, Turkey, de facto is the candidate country of the European Union as well.
Does the European Union, does Turkey respect international granite signatures?
Well,
Don't you think there is an anachronism? In the 74, was Cyprus part of the EU? So are you asking whether the EU should adopt sanctions against Turkey for facts?
No, I mean, no.
In my mind, this is logic that I cannot. This is logic that I cannot
follow. It was negotiated when Cyprus got into the EU.
No.
Thank you for getting us into the EU.
I will tell you, because I took time in second track diplomacy at the time. I can tell you for the European Union, there were two things. First, if it had not allowed Cyprus, it would have given veto to a non-member, Turkey, it was not the first time. Second, Greece would have vetoed the expansion of the other countries, as simple as that. This is life. Anyway, I would leave it at that. Yes.
Your question.
I will come to you. I will come to you and you can say whatever you want. Okay, so the questions again to you, my dear colleague, is could have the war been prevented? And I will take it one step forward. Assume that we turn the clock back, not to 2020, let's take 2010, and you are the advisor to the Ukrainian government, and you can say, take a preemptive move because there are clouds, and if we were to agree to neutrality and we get everybody to sign that the territorial integrity of Ukraine would be upheld, what we should have done at the time?
Okay, but we were a neutral country. We were a neutral country, and we got guarantees.
So, but at the same time, I remember even in Cyprus, when we were reading the reports, they was talk about NATO then. I'm not taking a part in this. I just want to ask if, for example, I will tell you something as a Cypriot. In the case of Cyprus, Cypriots were used in the past. Cypriots were used in the past to stabilize President Makarios, and we will have the Turks coming. And many times I ask those compatriot Cypriots, with what you know now, would you have done it then? Sometimes I don't get an answer, sometimes they don't talk to me. They see me and they turn the corner, not to avoid responding to me, because they hated President Makarios. And the question I was saying to you is that, was there anything that could have been done to prevent this great tragedy? Because it is a tragedy. It is a tragedy for Ukraine, it is a tragedy for Russia, it's a tragedy for Europe. And talking about sanctions, we are here too. Not only the tragedy of Europeans as a whole. So that's the question about it. Was there anything that could have been done to prevent it, or was it inevitable? In your perspective, that's what I'm getting at.
Yes. Okay. First of all, we cannot equate aggressor and its victim. Look, Ukraine, because you said tragedy for Ukraine, tragedy for Russia.
For the peoples, I'm talking about
What tragedy for the peoples of Russia? Are they bombarded? 14 million Ukrainians are IDPs. Do we have IDPs in Russia?
I follow with what you're saying. I'm sorry if I did not express well. I don't think even an aggressor nation, people are happy with it.
So what do you say about that?
Many Russian people support the region.
Look.
Okay, I put it, let me not take, I take the point in the sense, not to equate the question, that was there anything that could have been done to prevent it?
Well, okay.
That's what I'm trying to get.
First of all, I think it's very, as I have said already, okay. As I have already said, look, I think before 2014 and actually before 2022, it was very comfortable for the West to live in a world which overpassed the Cold War. Okay, so they wanted to have a business. Okay, Russia is peaceful, Russia is integrating into Europe, so we will have all this negotiation, business as usual, despite aggression against Georgia, Syria, Crimea, and so on and so forth. And it appeared to be appeasement of aggressor. So I think there should be, like, by the way, like maybe it's difficult for me to compare, despite the fact that I visited your museums of national struggle, but it's difficult for me to compare because I'm not, a specialist here. But if there were sanctions if maybe they would work. So I'm talking now, but I am talking about Ukraine. If there were, decisive steps by the West in all these cases of Russia's aggression, maybe Russia would refrain. Yes. Now, as a pedantic historian and political scientist, I think it's always necessary to stick to the facts. Okay? And that's why it's really, for me, I'm so surprised. For the third year of the full-scale invasion and 10 years of the Russia's war against Ukraine, again to hear these Russian arguments of Russian propaganda, of Russia today, about that Ukrainians were anti-Russian and so on and so forth. We need to have facts to discuss it. So maybe I will surprise Mr. Madison. By the way, have you ever been to Ukraine?
Only Moscow.
Okay. That's, so the problem is that after the war in Ukraine, actually many people appear to be specialists on Ukraine without even, visiting Ukraine. So maybe so may I explain to you, just listen to what I say, that I am half Ukrainian and half Russian, okay? Guess what was my native language?
It depends where you're born and
In Kyiv, in the capital of Ukraine.
what language your mother spoke to you, whether your mother was Russian or...
My father was Ukrainian, my father was Ukrainian.
And your mother?
Formerly Russian, Basically, she was Ukrainian, but because of this... Exactly.
Very close.
Well,
Except the further west you get, the more Polish dialect...
okay. So this is for you to understand the situation, that we Ukrainians, before this war, we were all bilingual. And if I may show this graph, this is the attitude to Russia. Red, positive attitude to Russia. Look, very positive. And then it collapsed. And then it collapsed. Positive attitude to Russia, then it collapsed. What year? 2014. Because of Russian aggression. So basically here, you know, it's not a gray situation. It's black and white situation. There is aggression, aggressor, and the victim. And unfortunately, the West and international community in general were not able to put the red lines. Again, for you, Mr. Madison, to understand what we have in Ukraine right now, look, after Russian aggression in 2014, actually many Ukrainians of Russian origin, Russians who lived in Ukraine, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, in the same way as Crimean Tatars or Jews or even Hungarians, they joined Ukrainian army to defend Ukraine. It means, it looks strange for you, right? But it means, so Russian speakers and Russians who were in Russia, you know, they were saying in Russian, we are defending Ukraine. So we have this idea of political nation. It doesn't matter, you know, what is your ethnic origin, what is your language, what is your, you know, religious denomination. So this is called political nation, and that's what we have in Ukraine. And if you, yeah. No, I am not emotional. I am just giving, look, you are saying, I'm sorry, you are saying that it's because I love my country. I love my country. But I know the facts. And you know, in every country which I visit, I would like to see something to understand the country. So my first advice to you would be to go to Ukraine, to go to Kiev, to go to Western Ukraine and see by your own eyes if there are Ukrainians, you know, who are beating those Russian speakers, as Russia is saying. Now, about, yes, this would be very good. I would be happy to be a host. Now, let's move to European security architecture. And here I would agree to a great extent with Mr. Mirko Giordani. Okay, so basically about the title, after the war in Ukraine, it's very, but what do we mean? The end of the war in Ukraine. And here we are coming to different scenarios. We are realistic. So we understand that there could be, definitely there would be no total Russian victory. But Russia may try to keep the occupied territories. Actually, they declared annexations of these territories. So the question here is, and the question is again for EU, for NATO, for other countries in the global south, we need to have just peace, not just peace, you know, based on ceasefire line. Because in this case, you know, Russia would keep, you know, all the annexed territories. But we need a just peace. Just peace includes many points, okay, including punishment and all these things. I will not talk about punishment. But the point number one for Ukrainians is to keep territorial integrity of Ukraine. Full stop. If we don't have such a peace, it's not a just peace. Okay? It's written in the UN Charter, it's recognized by other countries. So there are many voices which I hear in the West or in global South. Ukrainians, be realistic. It's not possible, you know, to defeat Russia. It's not possible. You need to have a compromise. Give up these territories to Russia. Is it the right approach? I don't think so. Because in this case, pardon? Okay, look. Okay, so
I would agree with the word justice and territorial integrity. As a Cypriot, I cannot do anything else than that. But
okay, I understand your situation. So I understand this situation, okay? But in our situation, again, it wouldn't be just peace. Would you like to live in the world of jungle, where aggressor would dictate, nuclear aggressor would dictate, I would like to have you, and if you support Ukraine, we have our nuclear bomb.
If I may, point taken. I was not going to make this point, but I think...
And let me just end one...
1 minute. I think, by definition, there are three possibilities in the war today. One, Russia is victorious. Two, Ukraine is victorious. And three,
frozen conflict.
Frozen conflict, like
But this would be...
And I have been reading reports from different perspectives about possibilities, so what possibilities as a social scientist, I can put possibilities there and all that. The most probable to me is cold peace until then. And then the question is that what is signed and what is not signed. Because it's a real situation. And you talk about justice, I hope that's the world we should be living into and avoid the jungle. And living next to Turkey before 74 it was 40 kilometers, now it's about a kilometer from here. And we don't know about tomorrow which time. You know? That's it.
But so let me finish.
Okay.
In this in this situation, you know, if we agree, I understand, you know, that there are many forces, you know, which think, well, it's necessary to have a compromise, but it's like having compromise with devil.
I'm not saying. I said.
I am saying compromise. Okay, I am because no, friends. Excuse me. May I just end? You know. Okay, so you know I am saying compromise because we hear about it. So the compromise with devil, the compromise with Hitler, would lead to further war and to further aggressions. So that's why yes, there is a realism. But there are two answers to that. If we have devil who is coming to us, we may resist him, like we did during World War II. Or we may agree to demands by the devil. There are two possible situations. So the future will depend on all of us. First of all, Ukrainians, then international community. This is difficult here.
Frozen conflict is not being compromised. Compromise when you sign something.
Okay,
You haven't
but
signed anything.
yeah, but
It's
we have.
frozen conflict. And we thought at the time it was the best under the circumstances. I think if that would continue, Cyprus would have to take it away.
Okay,
Or nobody would have given it.
Final phrase. First scenario, which you mentioned, Russia will not win over Ukraine. That's clear. You know, nobody believed that Ukraine would survive in 2 or 3 days after Russian aggression. Russia was defeated near Kiev. So that's very important to remember. We can defeat Russia.
Do you have some questions?
The same I asked. Yes, of course. The same. I would have to finish and then I will give you this. The question is that could have the war been prevented, and how do you envision the European security architecture after the war in Ukraine? And then the question, the definition of European security architecture is true. A common European security structure for members of the Union plus others who would be in the enlargement process, or a situation where you see the United States and Russian Federation signing something.
I believe that the war could have been avoided with another president of the United States, pretty much. You know, like we are now. I've been interviewed like dozens of times on the war in Ukraine during the summer, and every time they ask me, when do you think like that the war will end? At what time? At what stage is the war? And they always ask me about the latest Russian attack and the latest Ukrainian counterattack. And I say, like, listen, like this is just like a game. It's like tit for tat. And we are waiting for the elections in America pretty much to understand where this is going. And in the future, if I am seeing in the future, I would say that the elections in America will decide whether or not someone at least will try to stop the war. And I'm sorry, but if we don't want to have a Cyprus-like situation with a frozen conflict, in which like the conflict will go for other X years, something has to be done, and has to be done in two ways, or like a blow in which someone win and someone else lose, or a compromise. And the nature of the compromise, I don't know. I'm not like a mind reader, like you can see like on the policy of the two candidates in the American elections. If the Democratic candidate is going to win, we will have, like, I believe, a conservation of the status quo pre ante. If the other candidate is going to win, we will have like something new which we still don't know, and perhaps can be a compromise, a peace. What is the content of the possible peace? We don't know. We can try to guess it. This is not my ideas, but I can try to guess it. And the stone, if you launch a stone, pretty much you know where it lands. And the possible compromise would be that one part is going to Russia and the other part is going to NATO or the European Union. This is pretty much, you know, the content of a possible compromise. I'm not saying something new to the audience and not even something new for you, Professor. This is something that is pretty much well known. So I would say that the conflict could have been avoided if someone else was sitting at the White House. You are saying no. At the Kremlin, it's very difficult to have someone new sitting in the Kremlin. I don't think about that Russian politics can change with new leaders.
Even before 14, earlier Ukrainian people, not politicians, declared that they share values with European Union and people wanted integration.
I'm not making.
Appointed by Putin, Yanukovych was thrown by people from the country. He in his presidential
No, I'm not speaking about values. I'm not speaking about. Can I speak? Can I speak? Can I speak? Can I speak? I want to. No, I understand, but like, I understand like the emotions. I understand them. No, I understand about the emotions, but you know, like I am here to speak about power play, because what counts, it's not about UN Charter or what the international law is saying, like, because like some players, like we have to acknowledge the fact that some players in the world don't play with the rules that we in the West accept. Some play. I am telling you, I am trying to answer. It happens that the war started. And it started because someone started and they didn't, you know, like the fact is that Putin invaded Ukraine for some reason, and that's it. But because there wasn't someone that was ready to sit on the table and recognize the devil. The fact is that, for example, see what happened with the Second World War, okay? In which there was like one man that was the evil, which was Hitler, which now, you know, you can make the parallel with Vladimir Putin. One British guy go there and speak with the devil. Wait a second. A British guy went there, the British Prime Minister went in Germany to speak with the evil, and he went back to the motherland saying, oh, we have an agreement, okay? But this didn't work, and the next Prime Minister of Great Britain declared war. But the British people and American people actually fought a war. So we have to understand that if you want to uphold some values, you need to put the skin in the game. At that time, it was, let's say, easier to put the skin in the game, and like French people knows it because they have fought alongside British, and they have fought alongside Americans. At that time, it was easier because there wasn't something called atomic bombs. And now states states that have atomic bombs decide the foreign policy. Like, for example, if we have a European common army, who do you think would be the commander-in-chief of the European common army? The only country that have nuclear bombs which is France, and rightly so. Like, who can shape better security if the guy that can, decide the security because they have the deterrent to decide it. You can rotate atomic bombs. I don't think that France would agree on that. And rightly so. If I was a French leader, I would not agree to rotate my only deterrence against a foreign invasion. Because now we live in peace and we don't think about, like, power play. We live in peace, so we think about that we can solve everything with international law. There are some players that don't play the same game in which we are playing. So I'm saying, if you want to defeat Russia and you don't want to end up in a frozen war, so like, I want to be clear, if you want to defeat finally Russia and you don't want to end up in a situation like Cyprus, in a situation like Israel and Transjordan, if you don't want to end in the situation of or North Korea, South Korea, you need to give a decisive blow. The decisive blow, you can give it only if you put skin in the game. But it's very difficult nowadays to put skin in the game because Article 5 of NATO. Because if you put skin in the game, so you fight alongside the Ukrainians in order to give the blow to Russia, you will start an atomic war, nuclear war. So, no, I am not interested now. I'm not interested. No, let me finish. What's your name? Anna, let me finish.
The thing with Turkey, like we say about conflict now, yes, I would impose sanctions and eliminate affairs with Turkey, because whenever we see the dictatorship, the Korea, the Turkey, the other Bashar Assad, and all the country which has dictatorship, they're fighting with civilized countries.
I want to say this one way. You see, there are two things. How I would like the world to be. And in that aspect, I am very Italian. How I would like the world to be and how the world is. You know something? The Security Council of the United Nations has never condemned Turkish occupation. Has never endorsed
firstly, to support what you just said, which is also in line with my view on sanctions. It's a British Foreign Office high-level paper was written then, and it's the same now, and it's this: we should also recognize that in the final analysis, Turkey must be regarded as more important to Western strategic interests than Greece, and that if risks must be run, they should be risks of further straining Greek rather than Turkish relations with the West. Now that is still true, whatever the pseudo-bonhomie, backslapping, cultural relations, that is still true at base, completely. Because Turkey is extremely clever at dancing. It's a diplomatic dancer, as we know. And Turkey knows how far it can go. It teases people, and that's it. Now, would you like me to sum up what I said or anything? There's so much. I mean, I could say so much to shock you, but I'm not going to because it's too much. Simply that I still consider the role of emotion and nationalism to be a dangerous factor. I see now that there's a tendency towards atavism in this quarrel, not just politically, but among the people of a country. Atavism, by which I mean, it seems at the moment that the Ukraine, which was secure and safe during the Soviet Union, of course, is going back to, this is looked at from afar, and don't interrupt anybody, please. This is going back, Ukraine is going back, reverting to its territorial situation before 1920, when the borders of Ukraine for 200-300 years were constantly changing. During the Second World War, there were killings between Poles and horrible things going on non-stop, and that we seem to be reverting back to that situation. Remember that the further away you are from something, the less involved, but the closer you get, the bloodier it gets.
Have you heard about Holodomor?
About what?
Holodomor.
Holo?
Holodomor.
Holodomor, can you spell it?
Genocide by most parliamentary word.
Have I heard of the Holocaust? Yeah, yes. Say it again. What do you...
Holodomor.
What are you referring to? Genocide. Yeah.
by artificially created hunger.
Which genocide? The world's full of genocide.
1932, 1933.
Yes, there was genocide. The Poles were killing them. They were vice versa. Look, arguing about genocide is not going to get us anywhere. I can't believe this. This is propagandistic. People are people. After genocide, horrible thing. Yeah, it's going on in Palestine. Genocide, non-stop, every day. And what are we doing? Nothing. And what are we doing in Greece? Instead of paying pensions on time, we send money to kill Russians. This is the world at the moment. I agree with you. You have to be realistic. Morality, forget it.
Okay.
There's no morality. Do me a favor. Morality.
Lady and Mr. Freiberg before I go. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Brilliant.
So you were talking about three options: otherwise Ukraine wins, or Russia wins, or we have, you said, a compromise, you said a frozen conflict. I would say that there is no third option, because we had this frozen conflict after invasion in 2014. It didn't last long. It lasted for 10 years. If we give Russia time with signing either some compromise, or you call it frozen conflict, it will not last for 50 years. It will last for 5 years, because Russia is already, all Russian economy is on the military basis. They are preparing for war. They moved all their economy into war. They are trading oil and gas, and are making tanks and weapons. That's what's going to happen. In 5 years, they will invade the other part of Ukraine, till Ukraine ends. And then they will come to Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. And then you know what happens. It is the scenario of World War II. So otherwise, European countries, as you said, will, yes, you go on the same ground and will have this architecture after war in Ukraine, or we have ruins of security in Europe, after Russia wins. So this is it. I don't know what other options are there. If you see any other this frozen conflict, why would Russia have a frozen conflict? I don't see why they would like to have frozen conflict with all the power and abilities they do have.
Thank you very much for your opinion. I'm not a panelist.
It's not an opinion, it's a question.
Yes, I'm not a panelist, I'm not a question, but since I have been tempted, I would say if it was up to me as a realistic perspective, I would try to see, I would love to see an agreement between Washington and Moscow, and that's the only way from a realist perspective. Panayotis Hadjibablis, the last question from you, and then
Thank you very much. Even though actually the discussion was revolving around the second part of the sentence, and not the first one, European security architecture, I will try to pose a question on the first. So for the European security architecture, because I'm very interested in this, and I'm participating in the formation of the European security architecture. So the question is, now we are everybody in Europe and in Brussels. We are speaking about the primacy of NATO as a first pillar of collective defense in Europe. This is what it is said, and it is declared by everybody, by the hierarchy of the European Union. My question is, unfortunately, and I'm always posing this question, everybody is closing his eyes or her eyes to the evasive neutral, to the big elephant in the room, Turkey, who is part of NATO. And my question is, at the moment, during the Ukrainian war, Turkey, in which side supports? Is NATO or Russia? And this actually goes back to my question about the primacy of NATO for collective defense and European versus European strategic autonomy. So I will accept any comment on this.
On Turkish position, right, during the war. Yes?
Because I have the term, as a Cypriot, I have the term territorial integrity of Ukraine. Any Cypriot, not Cypriot, would like to see territorial integrity of Ukraine, because if that is lost, there is a precedent that will be used against Cyprus. This is perfect. I wish that would be the case, and but I don't know how difficult it is, given the circumstances. In relation to the security, no matter what, I find it difficult. I find it, the Cold War, it had its problems, but it was more stable than what it is today. That's why I'm talking about the Washington-Moscow agreement, to agree not to battle each other and to have some rules of the game as they have at the time. Today it's worse than the Cuban crisis, which took the war near to a third world war, unfortunately. Emotions, understandable, fully understandable. We, 250 years after, we still have the same and more emotions. That's it. Thank you very much.
So is it possible to answer
Yes.
questions?
I give everybody 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes and then...
Somebody else, I need to concentrate.
Maybe they go first, so I
Yeah.
comment on everything.
Yes, okay, let me start from my right. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, yes. And if you want to be
3 minutes, because
yes,
it's
yes.
about my war,
Okay,
my country.
okay. And you want to be the last one as a lady, it's okay with me if the gentleman will agree.
Fine, I am flexible.
Okay, yes? You have 2 minutes?
2 minutes? Wow, it's a microcosm of life. All right, since we're in Cyprus, and since in some respects Cyprus can be regarded as a microcosm, and we're talking about frozen conflicts, by the way, don't forget that Japan and Russia still have a frozen conflict. That's another question. I don't think they'll attack each other now. I have written actually here that unless Washington and Moscow agree on an independent and neutral island, which is what Russia has and the Soviet Union have always wanted, which I think would have solved, there would have never been an invasion or a problem, but no, there was the Cold War, you mustn't listen to what the Russians say. Unless they both agree on an independent and neutral island, it will continue to be a case of waiting for Godot, or as the Greeks say, to aiou pote, which is the American policy from the late 50s, a continuing modus vivendi, which is a sweeter euphemism for frozen conflict. Another scenario would be Moscow, Ankara, and Athens, which would annoy the Anglo-Saxons, setting up a plan for an independent and neutral Cyprus. Yet another, and this is heavy, and it may annoy some people in here, would be Moscow's victory over Kiev, or should I say Kyiv, whatever it's called, and therefore a victory over Washington and London, which would almost by default weaken the Anglo-Saxon hold on the bases, which is all that the Cyprus problem is about. The bases. Never forget that, please. A most intriguing scenario, think about this, would be Moscow recognizing occupied Cyprus. Can you imagine how that would put the cat among the pigeons? I don't think they would, but imagine that if they got furious enough with the Cypriot and Greek policy, which is so, pro-Israel and anti, etc., that they could threaten to do that. At any rate, and I finish, because of Cyprus's status as a mere strategic strong point, I'm sorry if the people feel insulted by that description, then as now, its people's fate will depend on the external armchair Cold War warriors who still exist everywhere. Thank you.
I do not doubt what you said, because in 1878 our great-grandfathers went to bed as Ottoman subjects and they woke up as British subjects after a war between Russia and Turkey.
There was Mirko in mind.
The professor can answer.
Which one? On Turkey? Okay, on Turkey.
Okay. Actually, the question on Turkey is the easiest one, strangely enough, if it's about Turkish position during the war. So I would say double standards. So at the beginning of the war, they provided drones, which were very effective, Bayraktar, which were very effective during defense of our capital, and then Ukrainian offensive. Now they are not used to a great extent because of the changed situation. Turkey is strictly in favor of territorial integrity of Ukraine because of Crimea factor. They always saying Crimea is Ukraine. They participate in the exchanges of prisoners, so they are having as mediators. So they helped to release Crimean Tatar leaders and many Ukrainian military prisoners. On the other hand, Turkey didn't join sanctions, and Turkey is in good economic relations with Russia. So basically their trade helps Russia to finance the war. So this is the situation, reality of the situation. So we are not very happy about that, but that's how it is. Now, about Caribbean crisis. Who is talking about Caribbean crisis? Where do you hear it from? Where it starts? From Moscow. Because this is the idea of Putin to have nuclear blackmail from Moscow. And now we have the echo from the West, because the West believes in this nuclear brinkmanship. So Putin's strategy, unfortunately here, appears to be ineffective. So Putin, you know, threatened. Putin managed to threaten the whole war with Caribbean crisis and New Salt War. And finally, I would like to react, again, as a pedantic historian. Mr. Mallinson said that Ukraine was safe and happy in the Soviet Union. So I wish you never live under communism in the Soviet Union. I know what it is, and historians know what communism actually, how brutal communism was, not only in the whole communist countries, but especially in Ukraine. I do not wish you, and this, for me it's very interesting to find people in the West who still are saying that communism is, well, shouldn't be denounced because there was stable period and so on and so forth. Thank you.
I believe that the point on Turkey, like you have said it before, like with a small voice, it's Turkey being Turkey, and Turkey being Turkey and behaving like this in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine proves the point that we can speak about and we can lose time speaking about the international order, international law, while in the end it's always about what the political ruling class objectives are in reality. What is the things in the game? Like I don't know because I don't specialize in Turkey, obviously, but I believe that if Turkey supported first Ukraine and after continues to do trade with Russia, it means that it's pretty much neutral. It's pretty much doesn't want to take any precise stance on the Russian-Ukrainian issue because it can influence also the stance on Cyprus. NATO. And the fact that Turkey is in NATO, you can also see like the reaction against Israel in the war between Israel and Hamas. Like all the West, all the NATO countries, they are supporting Israel, and Turkey is the only country that supports the other guys. It pretty much, Turkey plays a different game. Like we have to understand that in the West, and when I say West, whenever we are saying West, and whenever I am saying West, I am also a victim of that. When we are saying West, we are speaking about nothing. Like, what is the West? It's a nebulous concept, but it simplifies what we are discussing about. Let's say the European bloc plus America. We play with some rules which don't apply to other political culture. And the political culture of Turkey is different from the political culture of us. And even like despite Turkey being part of NATO, Turkey acquired the freedom to play different games and to be with one foot in the West and in the other foot with the non-aligned countries, with the enemies of the West. Like, how is it possible that Recep Tayyip Erdogan is supporting the Hamas and it's supporting like Hezbollah in the war against Israel, while all NATO says the contrary? Because it has the political willingness to play this role. It's all about having the political willingness to play a role. And for example, my country, let's say the war in Libya, the invasion of Libya. Do you think that the invasion of Libya was useful for us as Italians? Obviously, it wasn't useful. But because we don't play the same game as Recep Erdogan, or we don't have the same political bravado that Erdogan has, or Turkey political, because I want to separate what Erdogan is and what Turkey is. Because Erdogan is a byproduct of the Turkish way of doing politics and stay in the international stage. And our prime minister are the byproduct of the Italian way of doing politics and playing in the international chessboard. This is the reality, because it wasn't in our interest to support, because our constitution said that we can declare war, but we have supported the bombings of Libya, that's for sure. Who actually dropped the bomb were the French and the British and the Americans. It wasn't useful for us, but we didn't say nothing. Because we don't play the same games that Turkey play. Turkey can play this game because Turkish political elites have been trained. They have a political, social system that support this kind of political game. Our system, and I mean Italian system, political system, doesn't support it, and we tend to align towards what the big guy is saying. That's the reason. We haven't earned this privilege. Turkey, they have earned this privilege.
Thank you. This is better. Just to pick up on some of the points that Mirko has made. I mean, starting from the West, I think more precise to be that we talk about democracies and autocracies and how they engaged, given those, in the international politics, and the ones who abide by the international law and the ones that break the international law. That, for me, would be the starting point and ending point when discussing those things. With the Turkey, I also don't think it's a neutral country. Neutral country does not engage in the weapons trade or does not engage in sanctions circumvention or the supporting. You're not the neutral by the default. And it had very, very transactionalist approach to many things, but I will not go on because I want to be very much focused on the title of our panel, which is European Security Architecture, and I just want to bring up the comments that Ksenia has made. Sorry, addressing you by name because I don't see your surname. I think this is a very, very realistic scenario that I also alluded to in my initial interventions, that Russia simply does not stop, and we have hundreds, 200, more than 200 years of history how Russia has been moving its borders. Frozen conflict in the region is not working because it's never really frozen. We had the annexation of Crimea 2014. The war at Donbass has been ongoing. Was it frozen? It was never really frozen. Before that, we had the war, invasion of Georgia. Have the borders stopped moving? No, they're moving up to this date. It's never really a frozen conflict, that it does not simply work. So what Ksenia has mentioned, Russia does not stop here. And because EU has not expanded or has not committed to expand, and because the NATO did not find political willingness to expand to the sovereign states that had the desire to join the NATO, this is why Russia started moving the borders, and it will simply not stop there. So this is, I think, very, very realistic scenario, and this is the call to the European Union and to the NATO to find political willingness. I know it's late, but this is the emergency call there. And also, I would like to ask our moderator, I don't want to take more time, but I wanted to ask you if you could share with everybody, so that we are all on the same page, the links about the fact that is Holodomor, because some of the speakers were not informed, so at least we will be all on the same page after the panel ends. Holodomor. Holodomor, that, yes, indeed, the hunger genocide implemented in Ukraine, because some of the speakers didn't know about it, so as the moderator, it would be good that you shared. Sure, but it's Googleable. It says.
But okay.
Sure.
Since you asked me of the moderator, I will share the word with you. At the Cyprus Center for European International Affairs, we used to have occasional meetings to discuss regional European international issues. And then usually we had somebody from the United States, somebody from Russia, somebody from the European Union, additionally perhaps Germany and Israeli. And we were talking about various issues. We were talking about mid-90s. And it was the time when the Russian man complained and he said the Soviet Union collapsed, the world, Warsaw Pact is not there. Why do you push for NATO? Why do you need American troops? Why do you need American troops in Europe? Okay, then the American guy, who was a White House official, said to Russia, look, with all due respect, we are not in Europe only for you. We are also here for the generals. Point number one. And then the ten of the Israelis said, okay, when we talk, I understand when we talk about security issues, I understand here we do have three powers. It's the United States, it's Russia, and it's Israel. But you like Europeans said, we cannot take you seriously when you talk about security and foreign policy. When you talk about security policy, it's only policy papers that you restrict. Then you guys need to restrict right now. And I'm afraid I have to agree with you. When you talk about security and foreign policy, you need military force. At this point in time, the European Union cannot use it. That's the way from a realistic perspective when I'm talking about in my mind the security architecture. I go back to the old style, Washington and Moscow, signing something to maintain. I think this is, and in the nuclear era, it's very difficult for a nuclear power to be difficult. A
What gives you the evidence that Russia will stick to the signing deals?
You see, I do not have any, like the same way that you perceive Russia, I perceive Turkey, but at the same time I still want to have a deal with them. Maybe that's now over. I come from a realistic school of thought. And I'm not ideologically driven for and against the way. I see certain goals that I want to achieve. And sometimes I may ask myself about issues that are pertinent to me and to us about the desirable. I know what is desirable, but I know if that is not possible, I go to the second best or the third best, which is feasible. And that's my methodology. And I want to share with you, I'm finalizing a book in Cyprus from 16 from the public to today and way forward, and I'm checking different scenarios as well. I'm not very happy with them, but I have to check them. Because I'm not happy doesn't mean that I'm not going to address them. And I know when to say no, and I want to say thank you very much. It was a very interesting afternoon. Not unexpectedly different perceptions and ideas about the issue, but I think I come out of this, personally come out of this event richer about and more understanding about the issue.
Thank you very much for your moderation.
Thank you.
It was tough, but nevertheless.